I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about something that I think all of us struggle with at some point, which is finding time to sew when life gets busy. We'll cover practical strategies for making progress on your projects even when you're short on time, how to set up your space for quick sewing sessions, and ways to stay motivated when you can only sew in small chunks. What's your record, Haley, for the fastest garment you've ever sewn from start to finish?
It has to be something knitwear.
T-shirt or something?
A T-shirt. There was I made a self-drafted knit dress that had like a scoop neckline and little cap sleeves. It was fitted, that I used to make a lot when I lived in California, and I could make that one in under an hour for sure, especially if it was like a fabric that didn't require anything real special. But definitely a knitwear project if we're talking clothes and not accessories.
Yeah, knits are so fast.
So fast.
Yeah.
What about you?
I would say, so the first thing that came to mind was my Goldie tee, because I made a YouTube video about it and actually timed how long it took, and it was less than 2 hours. But now, thinking back, the Margot skirt, which is a knit straight skirt, so it's basically just a waistband and 2 pieces, a front and a back piece. And that definitely took me less than an hour to make. And it's really comfy. I have 2 of those actually, and they're both really, really fast.
Yeah, knit pieces can be so quick and satisfying as long as if you're sewing it with a serger, like I sew my knits, as long as you don't get it into any sticky situations with your serger.
If your serger eats the fabric, then all bets are off. Yeah, definitely knits. They're nice and fast. All right. Well, if you have an icebreaker for us, a question for a future episode to lead us off, you can leave it in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll answer it in a future episode. All right. So today we're talking about finding time to sew when you're busy, which I think is something that all of us can relate to. I've gone through a lot of different phases with my sewing over the years, and there have been times when I've had tons of free time to sew, and then there's other times when I barely touched my sewing machine for months. And what I've learned is that it's not actually about having large blocks of free time. It's about how you approach your sewing practice. And the thing is, when we're busy, creative activities are often the first things that we push aside. We tend to think, I'll just sew when things calm down. But then honestly, when does life ever truly calm down? And there's just always something that's demanding our attention. So what I found is that waiting for the perfect time to sew usually means not sewing at all, at least for me. And when we don't make time for creativity, we really miss out on something that brings us joy and just helps us to process life. I used to think that I needed at least 3 or 4 hours to make any progress on a sewing project. That's how I approached not just sewing projects, but everything in my life. Like if I didn't have enough time to really make a huge dent in it, I just wouldn't do it. And that's really changed. So over time, I've completely shifted how I think about this. And I've learned to work with the time I have and not the time that I wish I had. So Haley, you have a busy life. You're a mom. Do you find it challenging to fit sewing into your schedule these days? I think I know the answer to this question before I ask it.
It's still so weird when I hear people call me a mom. I'm like, am I?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought that I was busy when I had one child, and then I had a second. And I was like, did I have 5 more children? Because it feels like I'm 5 times more busy. It's hard to find time to fit my sewing in. I was like you were before, where 2 hours used to be my like golden time, 2 to 3 hours, where I felt like I could really like get into the flow of sewing and accomplish something that felt really noteworthy to me. And that mindset really got in the way of me accomplishing as much. These days, it just has to be much smaller little chunks. Even something as small as like 10 minutes at a time. Even if it takes me like a month and a half to finish a project, at least I'm making progress on something, and it keeps me connected to my creativity, which is just kind of the approach I'm having to take in this season of my life.
Yeah.
And getting rid of like the shoulds of like how much I should be sewing, and how many garments a year I should be making. And I just like have thrown all of that out the window, and I'm a lot happier for it. What is your approach to fitting and sewing now, and how has it changed over the years?
Well, I think one thing that I've noticed is that when it comes to not just sewing, but a lot of creative activities in my life or things that I enjoy doing that are still in some way challenging, there's always a reason not to do them. There's always a reason to instead watch TV or browse the internet or do some online shopping or whatever is easier. It's just like easier for my brain to do those things. But in the long term, it's not satisfying. It's like junk food for my brain. And so there's always a reason not to do the things that I actually enjoy and that are actually fulfilling, even though they are fulfilling, is because they do offer that challenge. And so that's one thing that I've noticed. And I try to not use the excuse of, oh, it's going to take so much time. I don't have that much time to work on it right now, because I do think it's true, but it's also partially kind of my brain saying, let's do something easy instead of something that's a little bit hard. And so I'm trying to overcome that and just do little things, just do a little bit. If I can't do the whole thing, that's fine. I can just do 10 minutes or I can just do a little bit. This actually came up for me with gardening this weekend because I just ordered a whole bunch of soil for my raised beds. And I just told myself I have 12 raised beds and it's going to take, it's a lot of manual labor to fill that. So I just said, you know what? I'll just do one. I'll do one raised bed today. And then if I feel like it, I'll do a couple more. And I ended up doing 3 out of the 12. And it was, an hour or 2 of work and it felt great. And my back wasn't broken afterwards.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to take that approach to more things in life, especially if they're challenging or require some skill.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my friend Janine the other day, and she was like, how are your pants coming along? What did you accomplish on them? I was like, the last time I had talked to her about them was maybe a week before. And I was like, well, I threaded my serger in the correct color thread, and I wound a bobbin, and I threaded my sewing machine. And I didn't feel embarrassed when I said it. It was kind of funny. But I think there would have been a time where I would have been like, oh, I was so busy and made all of these excuses. But instead, it just felt like, well, at least I did something.
I did a little bit.
I have something to show for it.
Sometimes threading your machine is enough.
Yeah, it can be like those things that are mental blocks for you, I'm not going to sew the outseam on those pants. I don't even have my machine threaded. Yeah. Well, now I do.
Yeah. The other day before dinner, I just went out to my sewing shed and I just straightened everything up just so I would be ready for my next project. And that's all I did. It took like 15 minutes and then it felt great. I knew I'd be ready for the next one. All right, well, let's get into our tips because we have a lot of tips to share today. So the first tip is to break down your project into manageable steps. One of the biggest barriers to sewing when you're busy is looking at a project as one huge, massive undertaking. So instead, try breaking it down into a series of small tasks. For example, a button-up shirt could be broken down into cutting fabric, sewing the collars, sewing the yoke, attaching the sleeves, sewing the side seams, adding buttonholes, etc. So what I like to do is write down these steps as a checklist. And there's just something really satisfying about checking things off, even if it's just one small step. So you could just start by going through your pattern. Usually it's broken down for you already, so you can kind of look at what are the major steps, probably have an idea of how long things typically take you, and you can start to break those down and make yourself just like a little checklist. So think about it like reading a book. You wouldn't expect to read the whole thing in one sitting, but a chapter at a time is totally doable. So that's how I like to approach my sewing projects, and that really, really helps me.
Yeah, that leads us perfectly into our next tip, which is embracing sewing in small chunks. I used to think that I mentioned before, 2 to 3 hours in order to make really any real progress on a sewing project, but that just simply isn't true. You could accomplish a lot in 15 to 20 minutes. Maybe that's just cutting out your pattern pieces or sewing one seam or threading your serger or marking a buttonhole. These small chunks really add up over time and before you know it, you've finished a project. So small progress is always better than no progress at all.
Yeah.
I like to think of it like a savings account. Making little deposits still grow into something that's substantial over time. You can keep a little list by your sewing machine of quick tasks that you can do in 20 minutes or less, or you could use like the checklist that Sarai suggested before and using that as kind of like your quick task list so that when you have a small window of time, you'll know exactly what you can work on. What kinds of sewing tasks do you typically like to do when you have a little chunk of time, Sarai?
Cutting is a good one for, especially if I don't have like a lot of brain space for sewing.
Mm-hmm.
I like to cut multiple projects at a time. So that's more than 15 to 20 minutes usually, but that's one thing that I like to do if I have maybe an hour or something. With the 15, 20-minute tasks, like I said, straightening up is like one of them, or organizing my stuff so I'm ready for my next project. I find that really satisfying. And I am not like a cleaner. I'm not a clean person necessarily, in that I like to straighten up. But like typically I'm kind of messy. But for some reason with my sewing space, I just feel very satisfied when I've set everything up and I'm ready for the next project. So that's something I like to do. And I love organizing. I love organizing things.
Yeah, I like doing that too. Just kind of doing like a little like sewing space refresh. Or I'll thread my machine, or I'll take out the tools that I need for the project I'm going to be working on, even if that's just like picking out the marking tool that's going to contrast the fabric or whatever. It makes me feel like I can really just jump in when I'm ready.
Yeah, or just gathering all the supplies together in one place, everything you need for your next project. All right. The next one I think is really crucial for me, and it's been a big shift over the years, which is releasing yourself from deadlines. So unless you absolutely need something by a specific date, try not to impose strict deadlines on your projects. So when sewing feels like another obligation with a ticking clock, it can become just another source of stress instead of a relaxing creative outlet. So give yourself permission to sew at whatever pace works for your life right now. I've really noticed that when I remove that pressure, I actually end up sewing more because it feels like a treat rather than a task. So it's kind of like the difference between having to go for a run versus I get to go for a run. It just, one feels like an obligation and the other feels like a gift. I know I used to just always, I don't know why, but I always used to put these deadlines on my projects where it's like, okay, I have to finish this by the end of this week so I can move on to the next thing. And it doesn't make it fun. And then you are so focused on the outcome rather than enjoying the process of making something that it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, and then like the paralysis that can come with when you don't meet that self-imposed deadline, it can ultimately end up leading you to stall out.
Yeah. Sometimes I do have a little bit of deadlines because I do sew things so that I can make videos for you guys. And sometimes I do have to do that. But whenever it's possible not to, that's something that's really important to me. So sewing stays fun and enjoyable.
Totally. All right. Our next tip is to include quick and satisfying projects. I'm a huge fan of this. When you're short on time, it helps to have some projects that you can complete really quickly, little palette cleansers for your sewing. These small wins can be really motivating and satisfying, especially when larger projects are progressing more slowly. So you could do these in between projects. You can do this kind of like in the middle if you just need something to make you feel like you've accomplished something. If finishing something makes you feel more accomplished, which, like, let's be real.
Yeah.
It probably does. It does for me, at least. Some of my favorites are cloth napkins, little zippered pouches. I always need more of those somehow. Scrunchies. Y'all know how much I love a scrunchie. Or a simple tote bag. I love making lined tote bags. Recently, I made some reusable cotton rounds for removing makeup, and the whole project took less than an hour, and I used them every single day. It was great. Another idea could be simple knit tops. If you're in the mood for sewing something quick and easy that's a garment, you could make a basic t-shirt in about an hour, and it always feels like a big win, especially if you have a tried and true pattern that you love. What are some of your favorite quick win projects, Sarai?
I love a headband. That's another good one. The Drew headband is really fun to sew, and I use mine all the time. I put it on before I wash my face at the end of the day, and it keeps my hair out of my face. So I love that. The thing about reusable rounds for removing makeup, I think this would be another good one, is making washcloths for that same purpose. I have ones that I knitted myself, which are really nice, and I use them constantly. I use them every night. But you could also sew some out of like a terry type knit would be really nice. Or even like a linen, maybe. Probably you want something with a little bit of texture to it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think that would be a fun idea. But I also like just like a a simple knit top, like a t-shirt or something like that, is something that you can use a lot every day. And it's just so quick and easy.
Yeah, and when you get to use the things that you make, there's so much that's so motivating in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think any kind of quick win project that you're also going to use all the time, like those cotton rounds, like a simple t-shirt, those are going to be ones that you're going to reach for time and time again because the payoff was kind of twofold.
Yeah. And I also love the zippered pouches and scrunchies. I use those all the time. And tote bags. I love tote bags. I have a whole collection of tote bags that I've made. So those are all great ideas. The next tip is to motivate yourself with fabric that you love. So when time is limited, make sure you're working with fabrics that excite you. There's nothing worse than using your precious sewing time on a fabric that you're really just not that thrilled about just because you have it in your stash or whatever. I find that when I'm really excited about a fabric, I'm much more likely to make time for sewing, even if it's just 15 minutes before bed. It's kind of like meal planning with foods that you really love. You're just way more likely to cook at home if the ingredients are actually exciting to you. And don't save your special fabrics for some future time when you have more time or you have more skill. Use them now as a motivation for yourself. Do you think that certain fabrics motivate you to sew more than others, Haley?
Oh, definitely. Fabrics that I like looking at, like fun prints, fun colors. I feel like that's always really motivating. I even think sometimes like a fun contrasting thread color, anything that adds visual interest to the creative process is highly motivating to me.
Yeah.
I think that's another reason those little palette cleanser projects can be especially motivating because those are things that we tend to make in a little bit more fun fabric.
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw this morning, I saw a tote bag. It was a navy and white tote bag from APC. So the APC is a French label, very expensive, but it was really simple. But it had red top stitching on it. And I thought it was such a cool idea and something that you could easily make yourself. And it would be really fun and exciting, but also really fast to sew.
Yeah, I love that. Our next tip is to set up your sewing space so that it's really easy to access. So one of the biggest time wasters is setting up and putting away your sewing space each time you have to sew. If it's possible for you and for your space, try and create a dedicated space, even if it's just a corner where your machine can stay set up. You can have a little corner in your sewing room or in a room that has a folding table so that you have space that's just set up and ready to go so you don't have to spend those really precious small pockets of time pulling your sewing machine out. It just keeps things a lot more efficient. If you absolutely have to put everything away, try keeping your current projects in an organizational bin that you can quickly pull out. I like to use a clear plastic bin so I can see what's inside at a glance. It's like mise en place for cooking. Having everything prepped and ready means that you can just jump right in when you have a moment. I'm definitely guilty of, I like to clean between my sewing sessions, but finding that middle ground of tidying while keeping a productive mess out and ready for me next time has really helped me save a lot of time.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings us to our final tip, which I think is also very important for me and related to what Haley was just saying, which is to create a home for your in-progress work. So if you can't leave your sewing out all the time, having a designated spot for your in-progress projects can be really, really helpful. So that could be a special basket, or it could be a drawer, or even a garment bag that's hanging in your closet. The key is having everything for your current project all in one place. So the cut fabric, the thread, the pattern pieces, any notions you need all together. So I use a large market basket that I can grab whenever I have a bit of time to sew. I have like a peg rail in my sewing shed and I hang a big market basket on it. And when I'm working on a project, I'll just toss it into the basket in between sewing sessions if I can't get to it right away and I want to tidy everything up. So you can think of it like a knitting project bag, just something portable that keeps everything contained. And that system also helps me resist the urge to start too many projects at once because I can visually see what's already in progress. And that's really, really helpful to me. All right, so those were our tips, and I'm going to recap them for you guys. We talked about 7 ways to fit sewing into your busy life, breaking projects into manageable steps, embracing small sewing sessions, releasing yourself from unnecessary deadlines, including quick and satisfying projects, motivating yourself with fabric you love, setting up your space for easy access, and creating a home for in-progress work. So what's your big takeaway today, Haley?
My big takeaway is I'm feeling really motivated to sew the inseams and outseams on those pants I was talking about. So I think that I'm going to go do that tonight. Gave me a little kick in the pants.
I think mine is just going back to what I was saying earlier about how it can be easy for our minds to kind of trick us into not doing things that are good for our long-term mental health, and how we have to kind of come up with some boundaries and ways to overcome that natural urge to kind of zone out, really. At least for me, that's kind of an issue. And I think that learning how to do just a little bit at a time, just the tiniest amount, is so helpful because it gets you over that hump of starting. And I think that's usually the biggest barrier to doing anything that has even the slightest amount of friction to it, is just getting started. So whether that's working out, going for a walk, or starting a new project, or working in the garden, anything that has a little bit of difficulty associated with it, it's just really finding ways to get yourself to get started. And that's a lot of what we've been talking about today. All right. Well, we've been talking about motivating yourself with fabric as well, fabric that you love. And that brings me to something that I wanted to share with our listeners. That's that you might not know that Seamwork members get discounts at some of our favorite indie fabric stores. So you can save anywhere from 10 to 20% off your purchases as a Seamwork member. And a lot of members tell us that these discounts alone pay for their entire membership, especially if you like to shop at some of the smaller, more curated fabric shops that carry really special fabrics that you can't find in the big box stores. So if finding time to sew is challenging and having beautiful fabrics that inspire you waiting in your stash can be just the motivation you need to carve out those precious minutes. And to see a list of all the participating fabric stores, you can just visit our website at seamwork.com and check out the member benefits section. All right, if you like this episode, definitely leave us a review. We love hearing from you guys. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to be a part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com to learn how to join. And that's it for us this week. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork, or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.